Welcome to Advertisers Watching Ads, the weekly show where we invite brands to review other brands' ads.
I think this is one of the best representations I've seen of leaning into a consumer insight and doing something ultimately creative and helpful at the same time.
My question is, from a value standpoint, are you protecting your brand and your company, or are you protecting the consumer? It was more like, hey, we heard that they're using the fake ketchup in there. We need to make sure they're using the real ketchup. So let's manufacture something.
They took ketchup, which quite frankly is not sexy. So it gets people thinking about ketchup when people probably don't normally think about ketchup.
This week, we have guests.
I'm Steve Mudd. I'm the Director of Strategic Messaging and Content Marketing for NetApp. I'm also Senior Advisor to Talentless AI, a new AI-powered creative agency.
Hi, I'm Deanna Shimota, CEO of GrowthMode Marketing, which is a B2B demand generation marketing agency.
Hi, I'm Sharalyn Orr. I'm the Executive Director of Corporate Innovation at Estée Lauder Companies, and I focus on corporate marketing and consumer experience.
So this week's ad, and I'm going to call it more of an activation, is from Heinz Ketchup. It's called Is This Heinz or Is That Heinz? And it was activated in Turkey, I believe, but it's kind of part of the brand's wider efforts in this space of kind of allowing consumers to spot fakes or find more about what's the real Heinz behind the product.
Miren esto, Heinz se dio cuenta que su marca estaba tan instalada que había mucho ganado.
What would you vote this out of 5? Okay, so pretty good scores all around. Who would like to lead on just taking us through kind of what was going on here in the campaign?
I think this is one of the best representations I've seen of leaning into a consumer insight and doing something ultimately creative and helpful at the same time, right? I mean, they clearly found out through talking to consumers about they put ketchup on everything there. And then B, that consumers were complaining like, hey, this is a Heinz bottle, but this doesn't taste like Heinz. So then they're like, how can we fix this for them? And then they went back to the table and actually changed something on their packaging so that consumers would be able to spot a fake. And I think that's really genius.
You know, in this situation, the buyer is actually the restaurant, right? So if you stop and think about it, they're doing like a consumer campaign to create awareness that puts pressure on the buyer. Heinz actually sent all of these restaurants their bottles with the new stuff on it. And it didn't say whether they told them or not, that they put the red Pantone on it. But, if they didn't, that's kind of brilliant and sneaky too, because now you have these restaurants using the off-brand ketchup and putting it in there while they're doing this social campaign to ensure that people would go and see that and start to talk about it and create buzz around it. So that was pretty smart.
I'm sitting there thinking, was this really a problem? Like, were there really people calling and complaining about on the tables? Was this a manufactured problem? To me, it felt a little weird and disingenuous. Like, it was more like, hey, we heard that they're using the fake ketchup in there. We need to make sure they're using the real ketchup. So let's manufacture something.
I think when you look in the broader context of the whole campaign of the Is It Heinz, where they went to Reddit, they went to Instagram, they went to TikTok to find stories of actual people and the ludicrous things they do for their Heinz ketchup, like people carrying it in their wallet so that they've got a little packet in their wallet so they have it at the nice restaurant. It probably wasn't a real problem, but I think it's kind of genius what they did and leaning into I don't know, maybe they heard one story of that of someone complaining and then they're like, okay, let's fix this. And it created something that people will talk about, right? They made their product premium.
It very much could be somewhat engineered, but it's smart because having worked in the restaurant industry back when I was in college, it was kind of disgusting. You take the ketchup bottle that has like just a little bit left in it and you would go and you would refill it. And you think about it now, it's like, wow, that's really unsanitary. But that is how it works at a lot of restaurants. And who hasn't sat down and picked up a ketchup bottle and thought, gross, how old is this ketchup bottle? But I could see where this could actually backfire on Heinz, because quite frankly, if they use the same bottle over and over time, it's going to fade. It's not going to stay that true red forever. So they could be using Heinz and people could start calling them out like, you're not using Heinz, if there really are people that are that obsessed.
To me, I'm wondering about the value that a brand brings, right? So if I wear a dupe, like a fake Gucci, whatever, it's still a bag. It still works as a bag. In this instance with ketchup, right, there's health issues there. My question is, like, from a value standpoint, are you protecting your brand and your company, or are you protecting the consumer? And it's a nice connection, I think, when you can protect the consumer at the same time.
Well, and I think, something that they did that was really smart is they took ketchup, which quite frankly is not sexy. Who sits around thinking about ketchup? And they got the average person talking about ketchup and thinking about it. And I can tell you, just watching it, it made me think about ketchup. So it gets people thinking about ketchup when people probably don't normally think about ketchup. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, it probably really wasn't about like, hey, let's increase the revenue with these restaurants. It was, how can we get consumers involved in this just to create more buzz and brand awareness?
I'm always curious because there were meetings. Like, what was the origin of this brief? If the origin was the finance guys being like, hey, we know these restaurants are pretending to be our brand, they could have just sent a letter to the restaurants from the lawyers saying, don't mess with our ketchup, right? Like that would be to do it. But if the brief was, how do you get people to talk about ketchup? Right, a product that has essentially remained unchanged since the 1800s. This is one way to do it. Like, that's a hard brief to figure out how to get people to talk about ketchup.
I think Heinz has been making an investment in just trying to create social buzz. There was another one they did, and Dan, I don't know if you've talked about this on a past episode, but they created a ketchup bottle that has like the cap on both ends, because they said there was an argument, do you set the ketchup on the cap or do you set it on the other side? And so they're like, we solved that. We put it on both ends. So no matter which way you set your ketchup, the ketchup is sitting down by the cap. And then they did a whole social campaign about it. But it's like, clearly somebody, and I think they're working with Wonderman Thompson, has this as like, this is our strategy. Let's get people talking about ketchup and Heinz specifically by doing some clever, like, what are the challenges?
You have to reinvent yourselves a little bit. You have to be kind of bold and to innovate to keep that momentum. Even when you become, something like Heinz, where like nobody can name any other ketchup brand. Then I think that's really necessary. And it takes bravery. That's the scary thing to do for a heritage brand.
Brilliant. So if you were the brand manager, would you have approved it in its current format? Big thumbs up for yes, thumbs down for no, and then kind of in the middle if you wanted some changes?
I don't know what changes I would have wanted, but I think I would want something more.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time today. And we'll be back next week with more ads.